Welcome to the episode. Today, we're going to be trying to understand why Guatemala has the lowest taxes in Latin America. Guatemala has one of the lowest tax revenues in the world. According to data from the International Monetary Fund and the OECD, Guatemala collects roughly between 11 to 14% of GDP in taxes. This is not only the lowest in Latin America, it is amongst the lowest globally. For comparison, the Latin American average is roughly 21 to 22% of GDP. So, why does Guatemala collect so little in taxes? Is it simply a political choice? Or are there deeper structural reasons? I am Dr. René Padilla, and welcome to Policy and Development in the Americas, where we focus on factual information, clear analysis, and a non-partisan approach. If you enjoy this type of content, I invite you to give this episode a like and to subscribe to the channel. Our goal is not to advocate for policy changes, nor to claim that one is better than the other, but to help our subscribers better understand how economic systems function. Now, to understand why Guatemala has the lowest taxes in Latin America, we will examine four key factors. First, historical resistance to taxation. That happens in just about every country in the world, I think. Second, a large informal economy. Third, how taxes are structured and who actually pays. Fourth, corruption, trust, and institutional constraints. Guatemala's tax revenue has remained low for decades. Even during periods of economic growth, tax revenue has rarely exceeded 14% of GDP. This suggests Guatemala's low taxes are structural. Guatemala has the largest economy in Central America, but one of the smallest government budgets relative to its population. Okay, we're going to spend a little bit of time analyzing this slide because it will give us perspective into what low taxation can do to a country. If we look at the numbers here, we see that when we're looking at GDP, Guatemala's GDP is significantly higher than that of the other Central American countries. And this is something that Guatemalans certainly brag about. It is at 113 billion, and the next closest one is Costa Rica at 95 billion, and Panama at 83 billion. So then if we look at government revenue as a percentage of GDP, it shows here Guatemala 11 to 12%. I've seen it as high as 14%, but still, if we look at the numbers for Costa Rica, it's 22 to 23%, which is in line with the average for the Latin American countries. And basically, Guatemala's is lower than the rest of the Central American countries. Now, when we look at the government budget, we see that Costa Rica's and Panama's are significantly higher than Guatemala's. They are spending 27 billion on their citizens, and Guatemala is spending 19. Honduras and Nicaragua, certainly because their GDP is lower, their budget is also going to be lower. But if we look at the population, that's when we start getting some perspective into these numbers, because we can see that the population of Guatemala, it's over 18 million, and none of the other countries comes even close to that. If we are to look at the budgets of, let's say, Panama has 4.4 million people, and their budget is 27 billion. Costa Rica has 5.2 million, and their budget is also 27 billion. Guatemala has at least 3 times the population that they have, and it has a smaller budget. And then the numbers really become obvious when we look at the budget per person. Guatemala is spending $1,020 per person. We look at Costa Rica, 5,190, and Panama, 6,100. The only country that's lower than Guatemala is Nicaragua at 710. All of the other countries of Central America are spending more money on their citizens. So now the question begs, are low taxes necessarily a good thing for a country? This comparison highlights the structural nature of Guatemala's low tax capacity. Factor 1. Guatemala's low taxes are rooted in history. Low taxes have been encouraged by powerful economic elites supported by weak state institutions and limited public spending. Historically, tax reforms have often faced resistance. Over time, this created a long-term equilibrium. Low taxes, limited government capacity, and limited public investment. Factor 2. Another major factor is Guatemala's large informal economy. It is estimated that Guatemala's informal economy is about 70 to 80% of workers. This means that those percentages are the ones who operate in the informal sector. This creates structural limitations. If workers and businesses operate outside the formal system, tax collection becomes difficult. Even if tax rates increase, revenue may not increase significantly. Factor 3. Tax systems are not just about how much revenue is collected. They also shape how the economy functions. Guatemala relies heavily on consumption taxes, import taxes, and value-added taxes. These taxes are easier to collect, and taxes like consumption taxes are considered regressive, but they create an imbalance in the tax system. Formal businesses often bear more of the burden. Informal activity remains lightly taxed. Capital income is also taxed relatively lightly compared to stronger economies. This affects incentives and economic development. Factor 4. Corruption and trust. Public trust is another major factor, and many Guatemalans are skeptical about higher taxes due to concerns about corruption. These concerns are well-founded and reinforced by well-documented cases. One of the most widely known is the Odebrecht corruption scandal. Odebrecht is a Brazilian construction company that they admitted to paying bribes to government officials across Latin America in exchange for infrastructure contracts. In Guatemala, Odebrecht executives implicated Alejandro Sinibaldi, who was the former Minister of Communications, Infrastructure, and Housing, and Manuel Valdizón, a former presidential candidate. Prosecutors alleged that millions of dollars in bribes were paid in connection with infrastructure projects. These allegations led to investigations and reinforced the concerns about how public funds are mismanaged. Another well-documented case involved the ICS-PISA healthcare scandal. ICS is the acronym for Instituto Guatemalteco de Seguridad Social, which is basically a network of hospitals ran by the Social Security institution, where public health officials were accused of awarding contracts that resulted in poor medical services and harm to patients. These cases contributed to broader public skepticism. In fact, the contract was about services for dialysis, and 50 patients ended up dying from infection. Another example often cited involves Juan Francisco Solórzano Fopa. He is the former head of Guatemala's tax authority, or SAT. Solórzano Fopa served as head of the SAT from 2016 to 2018, 2 years. During his tenure, he focused on improving tax enforcement, including efforts targeting large taxpayers that had evaded some taxes. Tax collection increased during his period. However, his tenure became politically controversial and he was removed from his position by the president in 2018. Later, he faced legal investigations which supporters argue were politically motivated, while critics argued they were legitimate. Regardless of interpretation, the episode reinforced a broader perception. Improving tax enforcement can be politically difficult. Now, taxation of capital also plays a role. Guatemala and El Salvador approximately tax at 10% capital gains. Costa Rica taxes capital gains at around 15%. The United States at 20% plus whatever state taxes are due. In comparison, Chile taxes capital gains as income in some cases up to around 40%. This comparison highlights that Central America tends to tax capital lightly. In conclusion, Guatemala has the lowest taxes in Latin America for several structural reasons. First, historical resistance. Second, large informal economy. Third, the tax structure. And fourth, the corruption and trust that Guatemalans don't have on the government. Increase in taxes does not automatically lead to better outcomes. However, Guatemala's low taxes limit government's resources. Understanding this system helps to explain Guatemala's economic trajectory. In closing, remember that it is not about believing what we want to believe. It is about knowing what we need to know. I'll see you in the next episode.